Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this session. Good morning to all of you. Before we begin, 5 to 6 important topics out of the FAQ section of the Sunday paper. But you should remember that the 19999 offer plus 12 months free extension is going to end today, and therefore it's a good opportunity to become a part of the Unacademy family. The PDF of the last session yesterday and also today's session will be in this Telegram channel. You just have to subscribe to it. You just have to scan this. Now, let's talk about the topics which we are going to cover. The first one is the state of inequality in India. This is a very technical article. What I will do is I will try to make it in a way digestible, and more than that, what you can use in the examination in that regard. This is pure GS paper 3. Then we'll talk about BRICS and Trump, and then a refugee crisis which is happening in Mizoram. How are they handling it? And last but not the least, something very interesting and problematic, which is informal credit increasing whilst the government is arguing that formal credit is increasing. And in the end, just something related to the environment section, which is about the cheetahs which have been translocated to India. But looking at this list, the reason why this list is short is because of the Sunday paper. But this topic is quite technical. This topic is technical. This topic is technical. So it will take more time, and I will try to go slow and easily we can understand, because we'll talk about the Lorenz curve, we'll talk about the Gini coefficient, we'll talk about all of that. Now, the first article is what is the state of inequality in India? So inequality can be measured on different ways. Something called income inequality is there. And this is the best measure of how the population of a country is staggered in different, you can say, income brackets. And the World Bank uses a certain curve and a coefficient to establish income inequality across the world. That curve is called the Lorenz curve, and the coefficient is called the Gini coefficient. Now, before I go into the technicalities of it, I would first want you to understand what is the Lorenz curve and what is the Gini coefficient, and then we can talk about what the World Bank is arguing. Now, when we talk about the Lorenz curve, see, Lorenz curve is a graph which plots national income on the y-axis, the population on the x-axis, and thereafter it plots the income brackets. What you get is a certain curve. For example, here we get a curve like this, which tells you in which income bracket what amount or what percentage of population is there. Now, this curve is called Lorenz curve. However, there is one line of equilibrium which is called the perfect equality state. So, in Lorenz curve, if the curve, the Gini coefficient is linked to the area between the curve and the line of equilibrium, which is perfect equality. So this is perfect equality, and the curve, how it goes about, the area between this is called the Gini coefficient. So Lorenz curve is a graphical representation of actual income and wealth distribution. It compares cumulative income of the population and what is the share of the population with regards to it. Gini coefficient is calculated as the area between the Lorenz curve and the line of perfect equality. To be very, very clear, if Gini coefficient is 0, it means that there is perfect equality in the whole society. Nobody has extra income. If it is 1, it is perfectly unequal. There is too much inequality. So you would want to be closer to 0 and you would not like to be closer to 1. So Gini coefficient is something which is used by the World Bank based on the data to talk about inequality. So Lorenz curve plots income and population. Gini coefficient is the differentiation point between how much deviation is there from perfect equality. You would like this line to be as closer to perfect equality as much as away from it. So it comes 0 here, 1 here, and therefore you would want to be closer to zero. That is the whole idea. Do we understand this point first? Because I will only move forward when you understand what is Gini coefficient and Lorenz curve. This is pure economics and standard microeconomics. You understand it? Perfect. Now, the Gini coefficient recently calculated by the World Bank for India was 0.255. It said that from 0.288 it has become 0.255, and therefore inequality in India has reduced. As I said, 1 indicates extreme inequality, 0 indicates extreme equality. So therefore, based on World Bank data, in India, inequality has reduced, and it would be one of the best performing or lowest levels of inequality in the world. So from 0.288 to 0.255, a very good indicator because it is closer to 0. It is not 0.5, it is not 0.6, it is 0.2. Now, I will ask you a very simple, straightforward question. You tell me, can we say that in India, there is reducing inequality? You tell me, based on perception, based on what you see around yourself, and can this World Bank data be trusted? And the answer is very simply no. Looking around you, the ultra rich are becoming even more richer, the poorer sections are becoming even more poorer, and the middle class and the upper middle class is struggling with their income. Now, herein lies the anomaly. So now this becomes a paradox, right? This is a paradox. The paradox is World Bank says that the income inequality in India is in a way reducing. On the other hand, the perception and the ground realities are exactly the opposite. And this is where the article argues that the World Bank methodology is problematic because it does not use income data, but it uses consumption data. Now let's try to qualify. So our problem statement is the data of the World Bank says inequality has reduced. It is one of the best in the world, and the ground realities don't portray that. Now let's try to understand this income and consumption, what is called as conundrum. First, let's try to understand. Let's take an example. Let's take an example. We have, for example, Bahadur, and we also have Bhuvan. Now, let's talk about their income. So, for example, Bhuvan's income was 2 lakh rupees. Rather, Bahadur's income was 2 lakh rupees. His was 5 lakh rupees. And what happens is, consumption is basically how much income are they using for day-to-day use and for any form of, you can say, luxury buying or purchasing in that regard. Now, Bahadur used to consume out of this 2 lakh, 1 lakh. Bhuvan used to consume 2 lakh rupees. Now, in an ideal situation, the Gini coefficient and the Lorenz curve should capture this. Why? Because this 3 lakh gap is basically the inequality gap. But what the World Bank data does is, it does not capture this. It captures this. Consumption data. Based on a survey, the World Bank data is based on consumption data. Now, if it is based on consumption data, how does it calculate inequality, or how does it calculate the Gini coefficient? It says that the income of Bahadur became 2.5 lakh rupees and the income of Bhuvan became 5.5 lakh rupees, and therefore because his income increased but consumption was still low, therefore inequality has reduced because he is now saving more. This is the problem. When people's income, because there is no good indicator, Dipankar, the problem is the World Bank data has two major issues. First, it has no proper indicator to capture income, and also it cannot properly ascertain the income of the ultra rich. What I first want to establish to you is increase in income per se would not calculate or would not translate into increase in consumption. Meaning, when your income is this much and you are consuming 10% out of it, if your income increases, your consumption may not automatically increase because you may start to save more. So the savings increase, but the consumption does not increase or remains constant. You have to follow my thought process because it is a very technical article. We have established that Lorenz curve and Gini coefficient calculate inequality, but World Bank says inequality is reducing. Now the problem is, if World Bank is saying it is reducing, and specifically in India it is reducing, and it has reduced from 0.88, 2.88 to 2.55, how is that we don't see it on the ground? The reason is because World Bank data captures Gini coefficient and income differentiation not based on income data but on consumption data. That is based on household consumption expenditure survey. This survey is used to understand the relationship between income and consumption. What I wanted to establish to you is income change may not translate into consumption change. Can we understand this point first? Because then I'll talk about the ultra rich angle. Income change may not automatically convert into consumption change, because if you are earning 1 lakh and you get 1.5, it's not that you are going to spend that 0.5 lakhs. You may start to save it. Now that saving is not captured in this. The household consumption expenditure survey does not capture saving, it only captures expenditure. So basically, it is assuming the income and capturing income via consumption. And because there is no quick, you can say the elasticity is the word. The point is income and consumption quickly don't change. Meaning income changes, consumption will take time in change because savings would first be increasing. Do we understand this point? This is the first major issue. They can ask you what is the issue in the Gini coefficient used by the World Bank in GS paper 3. You should know what is the reason. The first reason is very simple and straightforward. Income change does not automatically become consumption change. When it does not automatically become consumption change, therefore consumption is not a good indicator to calculate inequality. Second issue with what World Bank is doing is because it is actually capturing consumption, it is not able to capture the real consumption of ultra rich. It is not able to capture the consumption levels of the ultra rich. So the income of the ultra rich is already dampened and their consumption is also not true. So World Bank measures inequality using consumption, not income or wealth. Consumption inequality is always lower than income inequality. Poor households spend most of their income on basic needs and save very little. When there is income increase, consumption does not increase proportionally. They begin to save more. As a result, consumption data understates actual inequality. The survey which is used is even more problematic because it does not capture the higher income consumption also. So what have we established till this point? We have established the Gini coefficient, the Lorenz curve, are good indicators of inequality, but this inequality data should be based on income. However, the reason why we see that paradox is World Bank does not use income, but rather uses consumption as a way of calculating the Lorenz curve. Because consumption is taken into consideration, the relative change in income does not proportionally translate into relative change in consumption. This is the first issue. The first issue being that relative change in income does not automatically become relative change in consumption. There is always a lag between income and consumption. Further, the second issue is that the survey which they are using does not capture ultra rich consumption. If they ask you a question on using the Gini coefficient as a problematic tool, will you be able to translate this as a mains answer? First, yes, no. If yes, then we talk about how can we change this understanding. Is this fine? I want everybody saying yes. Yes, sir, we understand it. You should not be sitting there. This is pure microeconomics. You can do that, Albert, but because the data sets are different, it will complicate it more. Right? Now, we have established that consumption is not a good indicator. We have established that the survey does not capture ultra rich. Then, what should be the real indicator? Now, here, there is a survey done by a researcher, World Inequality Database, it is called, WID, by Thomas Piketty. And Piketty said, I would rather use the word, this survey says, I will use tax data, I will use the rich list, and I will use the income tax data. By using this data, I can have a more realistic Gini coefficient. And what is interesting is, if you take these things into account, which is the tax, national survey, and the rich list, Piketty actually revised the Gini coefficient of India from 0.255 to 0.61, showing that the income inequality in India is quite big, because the closer you go to 1, it is more unequal, or inequality is more. If we take the Gini coefficient properly, taking into account the unqualified wealth and the undisclosed wealth of the ultra rich, it reaches till 0.75. Wealth inequality is 0.75, income inequality is 0.61. This is a real indicator of actually how much inequality is there, which we see on the ground itself. Therefore, World Bank is not giving you the real data. World Bank is not taking into account the fact that 1% of all Indians are using or having 40% of the wealth in India. And I think we don't really need to see that. We have the Ambanis, the Adanis, the Birlas, the Jindals. Those 1% have 40% of the wealth. This is the Lancet data, yes. And therefore, this is a real indicator. So the Gini coefficient is not 0.255, it is 0.61. And this is where the article argues that the World Bank has to take into account the fact that consumption inequality cannot increase whilst income inequality is increasing. As income rise, poorer households may increase consumption proportionally, while wealthier households save a bigger chunk. The higher savings then translates into wealth. So let's bring all of this together onto one slide and let's look at the question which UPSC can ask. I hope this extremely technical article now is making sense. I'll start from, I'm giving you a summary here. Lorenz curve captures inequality. Gini coefficient based on the Lorenz curve. Based on the Lorenz curve, the closer you are to 0, the less inequality you have. Now, World Bank says Gini coefficient is 0.255. But what is the problem in this data? It is based on consumption. And because it is based on consumption, income and consumption relationship is not properly established. Ultra rich are not taken into consideration when it comes to their real consumption. Now, in order to make this data more realistic, we need to take into account tax data, we need to take into account surveys, rather we'll say we need to take into account the rich list, and we need to take into account the income tax data. And if we take into this account, this becomes 0.61 for income, 0.75 for wealth. And this is true at the same point of time when consumption inequality is decreasing. The income inequality can increase. Why? Because with income increase, savings increase, not consumption. And therefore, World Bank is also not wrong because of its data, but it is not an indicator of inequality, it is an indicator of consumption inequality. There is therefore a need to understand that consumption inequality, income inequality, and wealth inequality are different things. At the same point of time, when consumption inequality is going down, income inequality and wealth inequality can go up. Why? Because there is a difference of savings, and that savings translates into wealth which the ultra rich have. This is where a question like this, the use of the Gini coefficient to understand inequality in India may be problematic. Elucidate. Can you elaborate the difference between wealth and income? Income is disposable income, Albert. Income is, for example, 1 lakh rupees which you get. However, after you have consumed or after you have bought your basic necessities, what is left is the income which you save. That saving is wealth for you because that is either giving you dividends, either giving you interest, or either giving you some form of returns. So the difference between money and capital, same difference between income and the concept of the wealth. Income automatically is not wealth because income can be consumed. Wealth is something which you've kept to the side. It is giving you some form of return. So it is either asset creation or it is based on return in that regard. So money in your savings account is income. Money in your FD is wealth because that is giving you a return, right? Okay. So is this fine? You will be able to now write an answer for this, which is how is Gini coefficient problematic or how does it actually not capture with regards to World Bank in India inequality? Because it is capturing consumption inequality, not income or wealth inequality. How if consumption decreases then income inequality increases? Because income and consumption, there is a slow change. The more you get income, the savings increase, not consumption. So there will be a lot of time after which income will show change in consumption. So when income inequality is increasing, consumption may not indicate that. That is, Lalita, the whole point. Consumption does not tell you the real gap between the savings and the income itself. So income inequality may be increasing, but consumption is still there because consumption changes over a period of time, not immediately. Can I get everybody's assertion? Sir, yes, this made sense to us. We put in a half an hour, but as I told you, it's an technical concept, technical topic based on pure microeconomics. Right? Come on, everybody says yes, we move to the next topic. Yes? Okay, perfect. Now, moving on to a little bit of the lighter articles in that regard. The first one is means according to the World Bank, it is emphasized that a poor individual is having lunch and a billionaire is also having lunch. Yes, very good, Manisha. The argument that lunch, there's not a major change in lunch, it gives you very, very good. Flour, that is the real problem. They are rather looking at the basic necessities. Both are buying rice, therefore inequality is not there. Very good example, very good analogy that way. Yes. The second article is again Donald Trump and how he has started to hate the BRICS in that regard. Now, BRICS as it is was always about countering the US hegemony or influence across the world. Now, he has recently threatened that he will push in 10% tariff on all members of the BRICS when the recent summit happened in Rio de Janeiro. Now, BRICS is 10 countries, though it is originally named after the founding members, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, BRICS. But now it includes Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and UAE. And with this expansion of BRICS to a 10-member body, that too including one of the most leading economies in that regard, which is India and China, along with Brazil and South Africa. Russia is not, I'll not say leading economy, it's a superpower, used to be erstwhile superpower, big economy, but not growing at that sense. It's a developed one, not a developing one. The expansion of the BRICS is something which has always threatened the US. Now, in multiple summits, now listen to me, in multiple summits of the BRICS rather, what has happened is that there has always been a push. And that push has been that BRICS members should trade in their own currencies, rather trading in dollar. And this is called in economic terms what is called as de-dollarization. Across the world, there is a certain push to not use dollar as a bilateral currency exchange and rather use the local currencies or the national currencies because of the volume of trade between these two partners. So rather than using dollars between Russia and India, India would rather prefer to pay it in rupees, and because Russia is also buying a lot of commodities from India, it would also want to pay in rupee. So it is dollar substitution which is being called as de-dollarization. That dollar is and still considered one of the most universal, you can say, currencies across the world. It will be accepted anywhere. But because dollar exchange value varies from economy to economy, from nation to nation, it is a burden on the nations which are developing. Therefore, there has always been a certain understanding, and Russia would want de-dollarization because that would allow for the hegemony, the control of the US over the world economy to wither away. China would also want that. India would also like the rupee to become more and more universal. Now, this is something which has always been subtly pushed. Nobody has ever talked about de-dollarization directly, but somehow Trump has become extremely sensitive to the BRICS because of this issue recently. So, Donald Trump has recently accused the BRICS of being anti-American and a threat to the US dollar. He is rather threatened by the emerging economies than the US dollar per se. And it is saying that it is going to push extra. He argued 100%. Now he's come to 10%. 3 to 4 different threats have come through. But the reason for that, this is very simple. First is the expansion. With the expansion of the BRICS from the first 5 to now next 5, Trump sees it as not an anti-American per se, but a bloc which can counterbalance American control and American influence in that regard. Further, because BRICS tries to do bilateral or maybe trilateral agreements based on local currencies, therefore, the US administration and Trump, though it is the administration which has made Trump conscious of this, because Trump is not that conscious of these things. The idea is BRICS has India and China, both nations which threaten the American economy in that regard. And that is where all of these developments where cross-border payments are now being done in local currencies or regional currencies or national currencies, this is threatening Trump. Now, what has Trump done to discourage something like this? He has already said that it's an anti-America bloc. Brazil is paying 50% more tariff. South Africa is saying he's brought in an ethnic angle also, that the Dutch descendants, the German descendants, the French descendants, the one we call the Afrikaner, they are not being treated properly, so 30% tariff. And on Russia, he is also pushing further 500% tariff under the sanctions which have come through under Russia-Ukraine. This would affect India and China, specifically India, because of the oil which we are taking from Russia at this point of time. Now, what is India's stance in this story? It's very simple. India's stance is BRICS is not anti-American. The MOS has argued that there have been multiple cases where the Russians have talked about substituting dollar. That has been noted, not adopted. Alternative currency, unified BRICS currency is something which has not been talked about. Even the External Affairs Minister has argued no policy to replace dollar, and it is not a bloc which is working for de-dollarization. Now, what is the gist of this? BRICS is expanding. It has all the leading economies, and it includes Iran, so therefore there is already a certain American angle here. In this context, there is a push for bilateral non-use of dollar. The idea that there needs to be an alternative currency. This has been in the ranks for a very long time. The US sees this as a threat and sees it as de-dollarization. The US has responded with tariffs. Again, I'm giving you the whole summary of this section. And it has also threatened further tariffs. But what is India's stance here? Neither is it anti-American, neither are we de-dollarized. But if you actually look at it, there is an undertone to it for sure. How China Indian economy affect the US economy, because China is the biggest exporter of the world. We want to be that same, and we are trying to break certain spaces where US is supplying, or we want to enter into the US economy. India and China are the leading developing economies. That is where the US economic hegemony is going to be in a way challenged in that way. Now, how does UPSC ask you a question? It says something like this. The BRICS ethos and principles inherently threaten the basic principle of US domination in the world. Elucidate. You cannot write this answer without talking about alternative currencies. Cannot talk about this without talking about de-dollarization. cannot talk about other things in that region. So I hope you will be able to tackle this question. It is something which still further has to develop, but I hope that you will be able to write a good answer based on the data which is given. Trump, it does not like this grouping because it has all the economies which have the power to together counter the effect of the US. Right? Okay. Trump sees regional groupings as a reflection of its waning influence and yes, Anisha. Anywhere there is a certain, you can say, non-West grouping, there will always be anxiety. There will always be anxiety. And that is what we see here also. Right? Okay. Now, moving to the third article of FAQ. You may not find this. The first three articles are also out of FAQ. Sunday paper does not have an editorial section. It has FAQ. You may not find this in the regional editions, only in Delhi or international edition. Now, the Mizoram sector is silently going through a certain refugee crisis, which most of India does not know about. And this article wants to point out how there is now more and more conflict-driven ethnic violence happening in Mizoram because of what is happening in Myanmar. Now, we all know that in 2021 February, there was a coup which happened in Myanmar where the military captured power from a democratically elected government. Now, in counter to this coup, there were multiple anti-junta organizations came up, and these anti-junta organizations wanted to challenge the military which is controlling the government as of right now in Myanmar. Now, because of the anti-junta organizations, the bordering areas in India, specifically in the Chin province, a lot of secret anti-junta organizations are operating. But what has recently happened is, because these anti-junta organizations are fighting amongst themselves, a lot of the Chin population has migrated across the border into India as refugees, and that is where 4,000 refugees have crossed over from Myanmar into Mizoram, and Mizoram is caught up in a conundrum how to actually manage these refugees. See, ethnically, because this whole sector has the same tribal identity, these men and women are actually closer to the Mizoram population in their ethnic identity. So therefore, there's no divergent ethnic identity here. It is just that the nationality is different. And previously, we used to have inner line permit at the concept of free movement regime. The free movement regime allowed for these tribes to move around also. So if I tell you the timeline for that, the free movement regime, which was introduced in 1968, Myanmar nationals and Mizoram and the Indian nationals, or the tribes in Mizoram and in Myanmar, could move around without visas, without passports. First, 40 kilometers inside each other's territory. Then it became 16 kilometers in 2004. Then it became 10 kilometers in 2024. However, even when the center suspended free movement regime in 2024, there have been a lot of local organizations, there have been a lot of organizations in Mizoram, because of their ethnic identity and because of their ethnic solidarity, they allowed for the movement of the Chin population because they thought that they were in distress. They were in distress, and because they were in distress, there was no real problem. However, what has recently emerged is, in the Chin state, two anti-junta organizations, Chin National Defense Force and Chinland Defense Force H, have fought together in order to control territory. In that context, the Champai district of Mizoram has received a lot of refugees. And this is where now there's a certain burden on the local population in that. So, previously we had the free movement regime that allowed for ethnic solidarity. When the regime was removed, still there was ethnic solidarity, and certain bands of people have been crossing over from the Myanmar sector into the Indian sector. However, because of this, there was some form of solidarity. Now, where the refugee crisis is becoming more and more problematic is that recently the local councils of the Mizoram state have started to ban refugees coming into their areas. And there is also eviction threats which are coming through. Even the center allocated 8 crore rupees so as to rehabilitate these refugees. What an activist has warned from Mizoram is this will create demographic issues. This will create resource-based issues, training the resources, and this will also pose as national security threat. Therefore, either the center intervenes and becomes more strict and make sure that the free movement regime relaxation which the locals have provided does not be there, or because India is not a signatory to any refugee convention, it can send these men and women back, children back, but that would be a problematic proposition based on humanitarian grounds. So this topic is not complete, but this is to give you certain understanding that the Chin refugee which is migrating from Myanmar into Mizoram may be a new crisis in making. Initially, there was a lot of warmth. There was open-armed understanding that everybody should come through. However, that did not happen or is not happening today. I hope you will now keep this word Chin in your understanding. And if they ask you a question based on terms and which state is it involved to, you will also be able to answer. Clear? Not again something out of the box, straightforward, simple, and based on the concept of how refugees have ethnic solidarity, and that solidarity allowed them to be accommodated, but that accommodative stance has been taken away from the locals because of resources, because of demographic change, and because of the burden on the local population itself. Clear, everyone? Eviction threat is because now people are saying that we'll send you back. That warmth and that solidarity is now breaking away when resources are getting strained in that regard. Okay, perfect. Now, another very interesting topic related to economy is again a report which has come through. See, there are two ways in which in India people get money. One is called formal channel. The other one is called informal channel. Formal channel is basically banks. Maybe you go to an NBFC, you may go to the government for some form of credit. Informal is local money lenders, chit funds, committees. Recently, again, a chit fund scam happened recently. Now, the government has been arguing for a very long time now, since 2014, that 96% of the population has access to bank accounts, therefore formal banking system, which would mean or which should mean that when it comes to credit, the formal credit based transactions and institutions should see growth vis-a-vis informal, because informal has three issues: not regulated properly, too high an interest rate, and mostly based on the men and women who may run away with the money, which has happened in multiple cases. Now, what this data shows, contrary to this understanding that 96% of the population has banking access, the poor and lower income population in India is borrowing more from the informal than the formal. The red which you see here is formal. The blue which you see here is informal credit. And if you actually pay attention, economically weaker section of the population is taking more credit than informal money lenders and chit funds, than actually the formal sector. The growth in lower income is also very high, which is 12% growth in non-institutional vis-a-vis 10% growth in institutional. Again, you can see even in middle income groups, there is more growth in informal sector, non-institutional credit than in the formal credit in that regard. It is only more than 10 lakh who is earning. There's again a decrease, but see, the decrease is more in formal than informal. The simple straightforward conclusion is people are going more towards informal, non-institutionalized credit zones than institutionalized credit zones. In that case, this data of 96% bank coverage becomes problematic because the lower sections are going to money lenders and chit funds. Now, this could be based on 3 to 4 reasons. What could be the reason? What could be the reasons? Can anybody tell me what would be the reasons? Why are people going to informal and non-institutional than institutional? Tell me. Why are they going more to non-institutional, institutional? What would be the reason? Very good, Romila. Very good. First, collaterals. Banks have a lot of red tapeism. Banks take a lot of things into consideration. Credit score, this, that. First, maybe this credit score regime. I will say credit regime. The other would be collaterals, yes. Other than that, what would be there? Lot of paperwork, yes. Red tapeism. Paperwork. Thereafter, anything else? Easy line, yes, very good. Fast. When it comes to, so rather we'll write slow. Slow, institutional. Very good. Easy to access in case of informal sector, yes. No easy access. Ease of communication, yes. Illiteracy is also there. So, I think you all know the answers. A bank will ask you to fill too many forms. The bank will ask you for collaterals. The bank will also give that money after multiple rounds of checks. The banks may not be able to take into emergency into account. The banks may also be a space which they don't want to go in. And a bank may also have too much paperwork which is not, which they don't understand. Chit funds and money lenders don't ask too many questions. Because they are charging a lot of interest rate, they just take the money, or rather they give the money. Simple. So you will be able to translate this as an answer in the examination, yes or no? Will you be able to? Which is, why is this data not a surprise to us? This data is not a surprise to us because banking loans are more cumbersome, more institutionalized, and therefore people would not want to go into that zones, rather would want to be within the space of informal where they are not asked too many questions. Perfect. Now, after this topic, I'll give you an overall summary and then we'll end this session. We know that in the Kuno National Park, multiple cheetahs have been relocated from Africa. Now, recently, one of the female cheetahs, Nabha, she died because she succumbed to the injuries which she sustained whilst in a hunting attempt. This is not a very good thing because this means that they have not been able to adapt to the habitat and the environment. Cheetahs should not die in the process of hunting. The argument which has been given is all other relocated, be it Gandhi Sagar Wildlife Sanctuary, be it Kuno National Park, all of them have adapted quite well. For example, the other two South African 6-year-old cheetahs, male Prabhas and Pavak, have done well, and even the other females are doing well. This is not the first time a translocated or a relocated cheetah has died, but this is happening in the background, which only shows you how difficult it is to reintroduce an animal into a certain environment, which is even a controlled environment. This was a controlled environment in which Nabha died. Just giving you an update. Don't have to be too formalistic in using this type of information. This only shows you the challenges of translocation, relocation of wildlife. Simple, straightforward concept. There are risks, obviously, Manisha, associated, but people are ready to take that risk. Now, before we end this session, let's wrap up everything by taking everything into consideration. The first topic we discussed, and keep on revising with me so that once you close this session, you only need the PPT. I hope now you know what is Gini coefficient. You know what is Lorenz curve. And now you know why World Bank data shows decrease of Gini coefficient, whilst in reality, there is an increase in the Gini coefficient. This is based on the concept of consumption and income. Consumption inequality has reduced, but income and wealth inequality has increased because they use the wrong survey. They are trying to, in a way, measure inequality based on consumption, not based on income and wealth. This can only be captured by looking at the ultra rich, and consumption inequality don't change very quickly. Thereafter, the second topic which we discussed was how BRICS, with its expansion to become 10 nations, is threatening the Americans, and that is because of their push for de-dollarization, and how the whole concept of BRICS itself threatens American dominance across the world. Thereafter, in the third article, we tried to understand how the concept of, this is the fourth one, how the concept of Mizoram, or how the concept of free movement regime, which initially led for refugees to be in a way absorbed quite well. Free movement regime allowed the refugees, the Chin refugees coming from Myanmar because of junta violence, first being accommodated but now leading to conflict. This is a very standard process which any local population goes through. And we have also seen that there's an increase in how people are going towards informal forms of credit rather than formal forms of credit. That is because of, as you listed, multiple reasons wherein there's more red tapeism. Though the risks are higher, people would, and see, do understand one thing, and let's be very honest, if I ask you this question again, I know the answer. You tell me, if a lower income individual goes to a bank, would a bank give a loan to that person? If we go by the fiscal biases, the social biases, economically weaker section person, if he goes into a bank today, SBI, and says, I want a loan of 2 lakh rupees, he will not be given that loan, because there is so much mistrust towards the poor that they will not be able to repay back. What has also been pointed out is that microfinancing loans are now defaulting, and that is going to further lead to even more issues in that regard. But we have to also take into account the social and structural and what is called as the larger, you can say, inherent bias towards the poor informal sector. And last is that the cheetahs which have been relocated, one of the cheetahs has died. If all of this is perfectly fine and clear, then we can wrap up for today. 5 to 6 important concepts out of the Sunday paper. I hope this has been comprehensive enough. I took enough time to teach Gini coefficient and Lorenz. Just go through it again, something which can now be in the news also. A general regarding answer writing, I have not just mentioned points, but explain keywords. No, Manisha, don't try to explain too much in answer writing, because what is going to happen is you will then start to overrun. If it's, for example, Lorenz curve and Gini coefficient, you may give the definitions. But if you start to explain to the examiner too much, you will never be able to write it within the same word limit. How you approach an answer is very simple, which is be specific. You have to certain places presume that the examiner, for example, don't explain de-dollarization. De-dollarization is something which the examiner also understands. So if you're explaining Gini coefficient, sure, but not de-dollarization. You should not be qualifying each and every word which you are writing in the examination, because then if you start to do that, you will never be able to finish the answer itself and it will always overrun. Be very specific. The key to mains answer writing is being specific. If this is the question, I will write this answer on. Right? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Take care and bye-bye.